today's political climate because of racial injustice and discrimination. In 1909, a group of African American white men and women established the NAACP. The founders included W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary White Ovington, Ida B. Wells, and William English Wellington. The organization was originally called the National Negro Committee, but over the years, the NAACP included more founders such as Tyree Jones. A quote from Tyree Jones states, "I think the NAACP isn't recognized enough for all the work it has done, especially in the field of law. They may have faded over the last couple of decades, but they are still fighting a good fight." The National Association of Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, is the oldest and most recognized for civil rights organization in the United States. With more than 500,000 members, the NAACP works locally and nationally to ensure political, educational, social, and economic equality for all, and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. Since its founding in 1909, the organization has been responsible for some of the greatest achievements in civil rights history. The NAACP has been working from 1909 until now, and it was founded in the New York headquarters but has now been moved to Baltimore and Maryland. From the NAACP vision statement quotes, "The vision of the National Association of Advancement of Colored People is to ensure a society in which all individuals have equal rights without any discrimination based on race." W.E.B. Du Bois founded the Crisis magazine in 1910 as a crusading voice for civil rights. Originally subtitled "A Record for Darker Races," the Crisis was a groundbreaking outlet for discussing critical issues confronting the African American community and sharing intellectual and artistic work of colored people. In its first decade, the Crisis magazine focused on vital issues such as lynching in World War I. From 1920 to 1921, Du Bois also published a children's edition of the Crisis called The Brownie's Book, the first periodical exclusively aimed towards Black youth in American history. A quote from J.W. Watts, a founder in NAACP, states, "Republicans think that the NAACP is the only voice for the Black community, but they are wrong. It is a voice for the Black community, but it is not the only voice."
Honorable, I'm here to bring you another segment pertaining to the NAACP. I'm here to talk about the Medgar Evers murder. An alleged white supremacist and a KKK member was convicted of the murder of Medgar Evers. These recent retrials have brought to light racism and worries about speedy trials. On June 12, 1963, Medgar Evers was shot to death in his family home's driveway in Jackson, Mississippi. In 1964, Brian De La Beckwith, the murderer of Medgar Evers, was not convicted of any crimes due to 2 mistrials due with dead juries. On February 5, 1994, Brian De La Beckwith was brought back into court for his murder of Medgar Evers. People of the time are saying, "In the 14 years that I've practiced, I have never had constitutional issues that were this serious, that to me were this clear-cut." That was Merida Coxwell, one of Medgar Evers' lawyers. Merida is talking about the right to a speedy and fair trial. Many raise issues of speedy and fair trials due to this new retrial being 31 years after the actual incident. Many believe that this is not that big of an issue due to similar circumstances revolving other murders in this time. Mr. De Lauder wrote to the Supreme Court that unlike one's accused, who may approve charge venue if he believes he cannot receive a fair trial at the place where the crime occurred, the prosecution may only wait for the passions about the case to subside. The prosecutions did not attempt a third trial after the second mistrial because it was impossible to find a fair one. At the time of Beckwith's first few trials, the only people who were on the jury were white jurors. White jurors who refused to convict anyone of murder of a person of color. Multiple people and multiple cases of murder were brought to trials, but never went through due to the injustices and the racism that multiple jurors have had. Recently, we have been able to bring back cases with fair trials and able to convict people who have committed these crimes due to views of racism and due to recent pursuits to find fair trials. Gwynn, a civil rights activist and a person crucial to these cases, has been noted saying, "Human injustices may well proceed both temporarily and spatially, from generation to generation and from place to place." She is discussing about how people will still be racist for many generations to come. Recently, people have been able to see pictures of Beckwith with Confederate flags in his yard and various other racist memorabilia. People around the whole United States have been cited with being racist, and we are finally now able to call them out for these injustices and bring forth new justice for people who have been murdered. On February 1944, Medgar Evers was finally able to rest peacefully, and his family was finally able to have peace and justice for their beloved father and husband. But for many families, that is still not here. We are now working to fix this.
4 students of North Carolina's Agricultural and Technical College will refuse service at a racist and segregated Popular Lunch spot. I'm here reporting from Greensboro, North Carolina, on the 4 African American men who were refused service at the Woolworth's lunch counter just days ago. Ezell Blair, Franklin McCain, Joseph McNeil, and David Richmond sat down at the Woolworth's lunch counter to get a bite to eat, but instead were faced with segregation and racism as the white waitress exclaims to them, "I'm sorry, we don't serve Negroes here." This news shocked the young college boys. And Ezell Blair responded, "I beg to disagree with you. You just finished serving me at the counter only 2 feet away." The young men were still refused service. A fire ignited in them. The whole lunch counter was full the next day that the young men had brought from their school. These brave actions of the 4 young men inspired college students across the South to start their own sit-ins, and expected, quote, 70,000 students had participated in similar protests. This is just to show the power that the youth have, uniting communities and spreading equality. Thank you, and now to Alex for the coverage on MLK's assassination.
I'm Alex Webb, and to finish up this news segment, I'm talking about the Martin Luther King assassination. So, today Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed in Memphis, Tennessee, when he was giving a speech supporting striking sanitation workers. This happened around 6:01 p.m. today with a bullet striking his face and neck, and was later rushed to the hospital, which he had died of blood loss. The person who did this was unknown at this time. Rioting has erupted in more than 100 U.S. cities. Many of the riots have been race riots and are happening everywhere, demanding equality after the civil rights activist Martin Luther King had been shot and killed. This tragedy happened 2 hours ago, and many people are enraged by this and have started their riots already. President Lyndon B. Johnson has declared a state of emergency. Due to many riots that have been caused by Martin Luther's death, the president has declared emergency, trying to alleviate the damages that have been caused. Another news, the FBI has opened up the investigation with King's murder, including 3,500 investigators and over $2 million US. This investigation is very important to many people, and people have been demanding that this happens and are needing the answers to the men responsible for this. With 3,500 investigators and over $2 million, making this one of the biggest investigations to ever go on. Despite the tragedy of Martin Luther King's death, he will live on in the hearts of the people that were so strongly held together by his speeches and what he had been fighting for.